At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
August 24th, 2016, the I Am 911 movement is born. One of my personal stories set the tone for this movement. What started out as a way to raise awareness for the reclassification issue for dispatchers quickly turned into peer support. 911 professionals from all over the world were sharing their stories. On Facebook alone, at that time, the engagements were over 34 million. It spawned a peer support session at conferences called Imagine Listening, where dispatchers shared their stories out loud or on paper. For years, I have been asked if this would ever become a book. Available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. From Titletown Publishing, Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we're about to get started here with Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader next-gen core services, and thank you. Shout out to all subscribers of the podcast. Thank you so very much. There is a lot coming your way, a lot of continued powerful episodes of this podcast, as well as speaking engagements that are going to be going on in different conferences, classes that I'm going to be teaching, and also the continued celebration and people receiving their Imagine Listening book. And crazy excited about all of that. So again, a lot of things to come, but we are simply going to jump right in. I have a guest today. We're going to be going over some stuff here, and she has got a full schedule today. So we're going to jump right in. And my guest today, I could say almost show regular now. There's been over 3, maybe 4 episodes. We've done stuff with Dare to Be Great as well. But I have Dr. Angela Johnson, former 911 dispatch supervisor, and is currently a licensed professional counselor. Hello. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. And what you're going through today is basically what I was going through yesterday. So I feel your I would say pain, but I mean, this is stuff that you love as well. It's just,
Yes.
I feel the energy. How about that? I feel the energy of everything that's going on.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes since the last time that I was on. So it's all exciting stuff.
Oh man, excellent. Well, that is always good to hear. But for those who are watching and listening, as always, a brief overview of your dispatch experience. Where do you come from?
So I was a dispatcher for about 18 years on the East Coast. And the last 5, I was supervisor and on permanent nights, by the way, for 5 years.
Oh, man.
Crisis intervention instructor for our local police department. And I was on the CISM team for about 10 years. And all of that sort of pushed me into the mental health field. So I knew my own experience and what I was struggling with, I couldn't stay in dispatch. I knew I had to get out, but I didn't know what else to do. So I was like, well, I'm going to go back to school. So I did that and became a licensed professional counselor. And I was like, okay, yeah, if I was going to go to school, I might as well, hey, let's just go all the way. So I just finished my doctorate.
Well done. Very, very nice. And we're going to go over some of the stuff that you've been doing recently as well. So you had you conducted a study, and
I
we're
did.
going to be going over the results. We were talking about this a few times. Also I had you as a speaker on Dare to Be Great 4,
Mhm.
and you were talking about a few things there as well. But now we're going to go over these findings, as I mentioned. What's the name of the study?
It is 911 dispatchers and compassion fatigue, and it's an interpretive phenomenology. And that's why I wanted to come back with the results, is because I was on your show first talking about the study in the very beginning stages.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I'm done. I've got to come back. I've got to share these results
And
with you.
yeah, and I'm excited to hear this as well. So I want to put some of this. You've got a PowerPoint, and I want to put this up on the screen here so that we can go over some of these. Now, you mentioned the study already,
Mhm.
and for those who are watching, we just want to mention this trigger warning that these are real life emotions, feelings, and experiences shared by dispatchers. This is their story. So we're gonna jump into this, and of course, if you can, mention the whole purpose of this study.
The purpose was, it really stemmed from my own experience in the
Mhm.
radio room. So I was struggling with this a lot, but I didn't know what it was because we never talked about it. We had 1 hour a year of mental health training, and that was it. So when I had the opportunity to do this study, I knew that I wanted to focus on compassion fatigue because it's not talked about. And compassion fatigue is symptoms are exactly the same as post traumatic stress, except for the way we get traumatized.
Mhm.
So the goal for me was not really to focus on the symptoms itself of compassion fatigue, because we can Google that. You know, what was important to me was I wanted to know the experiences of the dispatchers. I wanted them to share the impacts on their on their career, their personal lives, and does it impact the callers and the field units that we work with. So that was my purpose.
Man, and that's a big thing that I think a lot of people don't know about, and a lot of people don't. Not just those in the public that they don't know about, but those of us in the center taking these
Mhm.
calls and everything that we don't always pay attention to. And maybe we notice symptoms and all, but a lot of times also we think, nah, that's not happening to me. We're sometimes we're in denial, right?
Yes.
But when they get, and especially if they get pointed out, sometimes we feel attacked, and that is not just in dispatch. That can be in any profession.
Mhm.
But especially with this, I'm glad that you did this study and you went through it, and that others are going to be able to see this in the results, because again, sometimes we just don't know, we don't see it, or of course we're in that denial mode, and then when it hits
Yeah.
us, when it ends up hitting us, you think, damn, I was going through this. So this is good that we're gonna get a chance to go through this. So these are some of the stressors, right? These are some of the stressors that you were kind of focusing on. Is that right? Or
Right. These are some of the stressors that I could think of
Mhm.
that when I was a dispatcher, this is what we would go through every day. And this is what I found that is missing in the literature as well. Most people do not know of all of the stressors that dispatchers go through. We have the cell phone usage with GPS that doesn't work like TV, those kind of things. We have language barriers where we don't really want to use a language line or don't trust the language line. We get cussed at regularly. and it's just supposed to roll off our back, right? But sometimes it kind of sinks in there.
Yeah.
Our physical environment, it's like, oh, I get so jealous when you talk about radio rooms with windows and, carpet on the walls, and it's dark, and we usually have the last of everything. Everybody else in the department would get the newer, nicer things, and dispatch sort of gets leftovers or hand me downs. Staffing shortages are huge. 12-hour shifts can be ordered up to 16 days off canceled. And it was bad before the pandemic, but it's gotten a little bit worse since after that. And shift work. I mean, I remember having to drive to work in the middle of a hurricane. While, all you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my child? I can't leave him home alone in a hurricane. So all of these things just sort of create these stressors that most people have no idea. We don't get the closure. We can't make mistakes. And what we do really does have an impact on police encounters with the citizens and increases liability. Not to mention physical. We gain weight in the beginning because we sit all day. We can't get up. We have issues with blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes. All of these things are just compounded.
Oh man, yeah. This is a an interesting way to put it in my head. Just a
Yeah.
casserole of stressors. Just everything is thrown in, and I just really quick. I never really thought about the the idea of the physical environment.
Uh-huh.
I know that when I was in dispatch, thinking about it now, it makes me chuckle a little bit because it's so true. And it's going to different places for training or whichever. And you've got people from all over the state, at least for me during this times in Michigan. And I remember mentioning, oh yeah, the dispatch center that I'm in, we have these huge windows looking out into this forest like area with overseeing an all sport lake. And I would have people just kind of staring at me. I'm like, oh, did I say something wrong? And they would say, we're in a basement with like no windows. So
Yep.
then now thinking about it, if I were that person, like putting myself in their shoes, going back to my center and sitting there and looking around to the carpeted walls, no windows in a basement, thinking, man, that dude I talked to, he talked about, seeing the deer, running around or whatever, and it kind of eats at you.
Yeah, it does.
Ah,
Kind of does.
I know. Now I feel bad.
Or if you're on night shift and you take a break and you go outside and your center is not in the greatest neighborhood, nerve
Yeah.
wracking.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of thinking about too, you mentioning the shift work
Mhm.
and you can't leave your child at home because there's a hurricane, having to drive through a hurricane or whichever. Now this isn't exactly the same thing, but also just weather related, I guess, in general. I remember driving to dispatch and in the middle of a blizzard where
Yeah.
cars, like people, we were telling people not to be on the road unless
Yes.
it was an actual emergency, and my ass is on the road, but I'm trying to get to work, right? I'm trying to get to work, and I see this huge truck in a ditch on its side, and the driver, I notice, is on top of it on their phone calling for help. What that truck was actually one of the plow trucks, and
Oh
me
no.
right, and me freaking out because 'cause I'm in this little four-door sedan with bald tires at the time because I hadn't had the chance to change my tires yet, and I'm thinking, if that person who's supposed to be making the road better so that I can get to work can't make it, how am I gonna make it?
Yep. But you
It
were alpha. You had to.
exactly, yes, and I did make it. I made it to work. Oh, man, yeah, it's making me stressed out just thinking about it.
I know.
Uh, so this is good. These are all the stressors and everything that goes with it. Now we're going to be going over some of these findings and everything. Now, I want to look at this really quick.
Mhm.
some of the participants that you were focusing on as you were
Yes.
sending this out.
Yes. So first, I have to say thank you to everybody who participated.
Hmm.
This could not have happened without you. Um, so I am just forever grateful for your insight and everything that you contributed. So the participants had to be over the age of 18, didn't want any have guardian signatures or parents or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I, I was focusing on primary PSAPs because I noticed some of the research they would focus on one or the other, but not a primary PSAP that did all three. Had to be employed at least 2 years and work completely independent of a trainer. And what I did is I gave them what is called it's an assessment to ProQual 5, and all the participants had to meet the medium to high range for compassion fatigue. So everybody who participated was experiencing compassion fatigue. So 80 people answered the survey and completed the assessment. 75 met criteria. 34 scheduled the interviews. And I started seeing saturation, which is the same themes consistent from participant to participant. So I stopped at 20
Hmm.
for this type of study because
Interesting.
everybody was saying the same thing.
Oh man. So how does that make you feel though? In a way, I guess when you start seeing that there's a lot of people who are saying, kind of those same things.
Overwhelmed
Hmm.
in a way, frustrated that it hasn't improved, and validated also, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, all of this that I was going through at the time was not just me. It's not. There's a lot more. And why aren't we talking about that? Was the frustration part.
Right. I think for me, if I was still in dispatch and there was something that I was talking about with my deputy director, director, or whichever, and
Mhm.
or even some of the people in the county, and them saying, no, this is not it. That validation that you're talking about, like this is it right here. Like this says everything, and it's not just in my area, it's all over the place. There's several people or a lot of people rather, that are saying the same things.
Saying exactly the same things. And it was participants were from all over the US. So it wasn't one geographical location. Then you could say, okay, well, maybe these are more like high traffic cities. No, these were from all over the United States, from agencies.
Wow. All right, let's continue here. So we're gonna skip this here. We want to look at some of these themes. Okay, we're gonna go over some of these themes and then talk about some of the findings and such. So I just want to read over these titles here really quick, and then we'll
Mhm.
go to each theme. So
Okay.
you've got the 911 challenges, you got management agency, you got the physical impact, and that one is going to be one I want to touch on as well. Traumatic calls, of course, clinical symptoms, and then when the helpers need help. So these are all excellent themes here. And you've got the subordinate sections
Mhm.
here as well. So theme number one, 911 challenges. So looking at vivid imagery. Now, the participants' lived experiences, these are quotes that came from different participants.
Yes, these are direct quotes that came from the participants. This is not my interpretation,
Hmm.
or this is exactly what they said. So, in like the vivid imagery, this is the theme that came up from all the participants. So, the participant says when they are explaining it to you, you're picturing it in your head, and you don't understand the real damaging side of that until you've been doing it for a long time. And you're like, everything is not right in my head.
But I fully agree, because you've got everything, all these calls that are coming in. So those who are watching and listening right now, if if you're new to the podcast or you've only been listening to a few, um when we're taking these phone calls, we don't see what it is that is going on. So we are building these, basically, this picture in our head, putting these
Mhm.
pieces, these puzzle pieces together. to help us understand, but also to illustrate what it is that is going on for those who are headed out to help our caller. And it's true. I thinking about it now. When I was reading some of this before we got started, um, it was just, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like, yeah, that is exactly right, because you go through it and you just continue to go and go and go, and just like it says here, after a little while, then you start thinking, "Oh, okay, something is up."
Yeah. It's like, oh, and the issue with the vivid imagery is because we don't get that closure, we don't get to see it, we are
Mhm.
left with that picture in our head, and our imagination is so good, and our
Yeah,
picture is always worse than what the actual scene is, but we're left trying to process that vivid image.
exactly. Yes. So the lack of closure.
Yeah.
Oh man, so this one, not having closure with calls, you just soak it all in and internalize it all, and after a while, it just eats at you. Yeah, that is definitely it. Just like you were saying, that lack of closure. Now continue here with the behind the scenes part.
The behind the scenes are not seen as the dispatchers were talking about. They just want to be heard.
Mhm.
They don't understand why aren't people really paying attention to dispatchers and including them in public safety? And it's like they want to raise more awareness to what they do. And because dispatchers do a lot more than just answer the phone.
Yes, this. Well, really quick. Let me just touch on that. When I was in dispatch, still, I remember the the first time I was in a debriefing,
Mhm.
and my team and I went in there, and we were sitting at this literal round table with the rest of our sisters and brothers of public safety who went out to this call, and it was our turn to share our part of it.
Mhm.
And I will never forget, I think it was someone from fire. They the response immediately after we said our piece was, how come we've never had you in this before? Why have you not ever been here before? Because you just gave us a part that none of us would have ever known, and that's important. And we had a discussion there, and from that point on, they were pulling dispatch in, and of course, it's just maybe is we just need that chance, to
Yeah.
go in there. But also, I think one of the things too is that, do people automatically assume that it's going to be a no? Like, is that maybe why sometimes we're not invited to that debriefing, because we don't ask? Now, I know some people do ask, right? And they're told no. But I just sometimes wonder, and I mean, everybody always says it. The answer is always going to be no if you don't ask. So,
Right. And we actually talk about this
mhm.
too. This is one of the findings about our inclusion in debriefings. And most of the time, we're not because we're considered just dispatch.
Yeah,
We're not included.
damn it.
I know.
Uh, so the pick up the next call, it says you have people yelling, screaming, and cussing, and when you just move on to the next call, like you just didn't hear 20 minutes of pure torture for somebody, but it's your job. And that's a hard one, but it's a hard truth, right?
It is a hard truth. Well, what time does the parade start after you just try to talk to a suicidal caller for like 25 minutes? And then you have to pick up the next call. Or my favorite was always, what time is it?
Isn't wasn't before, like before Google and everything else, I thought there was like a phone number or something that
Yes.
you could call to get the time, right?
Yes, there was.
I don't know if that's still a thing, but I remember that. I remember that, where you could call and it would give you the time, and I don't know, other things, but that also goes along with at one time you could call for like movies that were playing, and if you missed it, you had to wait for the whole recording to go back again.
Or the weather. That's my generation. We would have to call for time and weather and movies. Yeah.
Uh, yep. I'm right there with you.
We didn't have Google.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that stuff wasn't around yet.
Uh-uh.
Um, So the shift work, shift change, and going to nights, that was when things really started to take a toll. So this part right here, so like midnights, I worked midnights all the time,
Mhm.
and what does this part mean here?
Well, there are a couple of aspects. So
Hmm.
sometimes shift work, we get a choice if we want to work the shift or not. And that has a great impact on versus if we're told, you know,
Ah,
or
yes.
you're hired. So for me, I was hired, we would rotate days and evenings and we had a permanent nights. And then something happened somewhere with one of them may just complain too much. So then we all rotated, no more permanents. And then we went back to a permanent night shift. But oh, if you want to be supervisor, you automatically go to night shift with no chance of coming off.
There you go.
So shift work, and even if it is, voluntary and you want to go to nights or evenings or whatever it is, it still messes up our natural rhythm of things. It takes a while for our body to adjust, and then sometimes it doesn't adjust properly to where it still impacts our physical and mental health.
That makes more sense now, and I couldn't agree more. When I very, very first started dispatching, it was hard to do anything because we would change every 2 weeks. There were 8-hour shifts. So it's 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6. But that midnight shift, when you got on it, you were on it for almost a month. And then you go directly to that 6A to 2P. And
Yeah.
that was horrible. And yeah, when I ended up switching to central dispatch in Michigan, it was 12-hour days, but then, you've got overtime, forced overtime, voluntold
Mhm.
overtime. And when I ended up getting promoted to supervisor, I thought I was going to go back to nights, but I didn't. I actually went to days first. So I had like a 3 or 4 month stint where I was on days, and that screwed everything up. But
Yeah.
such as dispatch life, right? So I can see that as, definitely part of those 911 challenges. So we move on to
Mhm.
management and agency. So this first part, I dig this one, of course. Love my job. Let's talk about that one.
I love my job. So this is one of the findings that really surprised me in a way.
Hmm.
Dispatchers absolutely loved what they do, despite of everything that dispatchers go through. They love helping the citizens of their community.
Hmm. That's very true. I mean, a lot of the people that I've spoken to in this program have said that they weren't exactly sure how it was going to go right when they started out, but as soon as they started, even just in a sit along, listening to calls
Hmm.
or, observing everyone or seeing how people were working together, it immediately got into their blood. And also, there have been a lot of people that I've spoken to who end up leaving the profession, and they end up coming back because they're and a lot of them have said this, not all of them, but a lot of them have said that what they were doing after dispatch wasn't as satisfying as helping people. Some of them would mention, oh, that adrenaline rush isn't there anymore. But the majority of them were saying that they were with the other job, it was they weren't doing something, or they were no longer doing something that was bigger than themselves,
Yeah.
and that's what they wanted to go back to, and that's why they continue to do it.
Hmm. And it, like they would also said, it becomes a part of who you are.
Yes, and that next part there, it almost consumes me sometimes.
Hmm.
How many is this? So are some of these quotes as well some of the ones where a lot of people were saying the same thing?
Yes, all of these themes are consistent with. So, in order to be a major theme, you had to have at least three of
Mhm.
the participants stating the exact same thing.
Wow.
So, yeah. And well, this is an interpretive phenomenology. So, it is looking at the lived experiences, and
Mhm.
the experiences are very similar.
Very much so. Well, let's look at that lack of support. Oh man. Yeah, so it says here for the lack of support, we almost feel like we are stuck now without support. If they spend a little money now and invest it in our mental health in the long run, it would be beneficial.
I love this one. This has to be one of the ones that impacted me the most because I'm just like cheering in the background. It's like, yes, if agencies would be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive
Mhm.
to the dispatchers that they employ, programs, support, debriefings, anything to help the dispatchers do the job that they can to the best of their ability.
What do you think the issue is there with some agencies? Do you think that it is just money, or do you think that it's, maybe let's just say, for example, the county themselves, they don't understand what it is that dispatch does. So when deputy directors or directors, whichever, approach them for more funding for any type of mental health and wellness, it gets shot down because they just don't know, or maybe they don't want to know, or they don't want to listen, or I don't know. What do you think? Just we're just talking. So like I don't know the answer, but I wonder if that's what it is, that they just don't completely understand.
So, this is another topic that we had talked about in this study. And I think it just, in my opinion, I think it's a combination of things.
Mhm.
So, you do have the monetary factor.
Yeah.
You do have some of the individuals that are in management in agencies that did not come from dispatch.
Mhm.
They came from some outside profession and they don't understand what dispatchers do on a daily basis. They know that we plug in, we answer phone calls, and we wear a headset, but they don't understand the traumatic impact of the calls and everything that goes along with it. Um, and the same with they don't understand the importance of having that mental health component to support our dispatchers because again they don't understand that hearing it can be just as bad as seeing it or even worse.
Mhm. Exactly. And sometimes you end up having those folks come in so they can see what it is that dispatch does, and then of course nothing happens.
Nothing. The phone never rings when we get visitors. What is it's like,
I was like, come on. Oh,
never?
yeah. Yeah, you almost are tempted to throw in that Q word or something just so that something happens while people are in there, and you're like, "No." Oh, man. Yeah. So,
Run around singing it.
what's that?
Run around singing. Oh,
Yeah.
quiet, quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just to have something happen so they can get a true look at what happens in dispatch when it all hits the fan. But also they'd be able to see like a well-oiled machine. Everyone just jumps in and they're doing what they do. It's as good as and great as they are. But then I think one of the moments too to have folks like that in there would be to see the aftermath,
Mhm.
after a hard call and seeing everyone still jumping right to the next call, or if they get a chance to sit and decompress or watch them walk out to the quiet room to decompress, something like that. I mean, that alone, I think, would be that much more powerful for people to see and think, wow, like this is this is legit. Like they go through a lot for this.
Yeah. I think you mentioned quiet room. We didn't have one of those. We were supposed to have one of those, but they ended up making it a storage closet instead of a quiet room.
Oh,
So we
jeez.
never got a quiet room.
Yeah, like, "Go head over to the storage room." "Okay." Like, "Can I sit on the mop bucket then?"
Yeah,
I
we did
I
that one.
I think our quiet room was like that too. I think it was a storage room, and then they ended up turning it into something for us, because there was, like, a lot of files in there and everything too, but they ended up moving that out, and they actually they turned it into something. So looking here, understaffed. It's all
Mhm.
over the place,
It
and it
is all over
says
the place.
we were working 48 hours a week. Then they upped our mandatory overtime to an additional 32 hours a week. What?
I couldn't imagine. I
Oh,
just couldn't imagine how exhausted I would be. After working that many hours a week, I just can't. I can't.
Yeah, I have I have a good friend of mine, and she was telling me about this was a while back, but she was telling it was almost like this. Reading this, it made me think back to a conversation that I had with her, where she was talking about the amount of hours working and then the overtime and all of that. And I just kept saying, man, just be careful. You know, try to take care of yourself as much as possible. Or if you need somebody to talk to, I'll just send me a message, give me a call. I'll help you decompress, but just through conversation. I don't know, something. But they were hurting. They were hurting. Everybody there was hurting because it was pretty bad. Um, Continuing on to supportive. So it says they are pretty good about checking in a bit later or when we get off shift. They'll check and make sure everything is okay. So they, meaning like supervisors, directors, deputy directors, or even like a peer support team, or what exactly does that part mean there?
No, this one dealt specifically with management.
Okay.
So, and this was really rare too. Most of the dispatchers were in the lack of support category,
Oh
but
man.
there were a couple that their agencies were really supportive when they got a traumatic call or when somebody was dealing with something that was particularly stressful. They did do a check in with them.
Hmm.
You know, hey, how are you doing? How was that call?
Now I wonder, with those agencies that actually have people to check in on them, what their staffing is like.
Yeah, I know. Probably better than everybody else's.
Right, yeah, because I would think, at least me personally, I would wanna work there.
Oh, me
I
too.
would wanna be in a spot where I've got, those in the top that are checking on me. That shows me that they care, there's
Mhm.
compassion there, and, that I actually mean something to them, and that I'm doing a good job, for the agency and the community as a whole.
Right. And not just a body in the seat or, somebody to answer the phone.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm sure there are some places that are like that, where like, "Well, we'll replace you, if you wanna go, we'll replace you," but, I don't know, there's not a lot of people that are jumping at the chance, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
this part here, oh,
Yes.
man, the physical impact. So, well, just right from the top, weight gain. I put on 100 pounds in my first 5 years behind the desk.
We sit and stress and we have these negative coping skills, whatever it is. Do we eat to feel better or we're not eating properly or
Mhm.
we may drink too much? But we would tell our new employees that came in, you're going to gain weight your first year. Don't be surprised. It's going to happen.
I think, as they say, honesty is the best policy, right? And you want people to know what they're getting into. It's just like I've had people say in the past, like when I very first started the IM91 movement, there were some people that were saying to me, I love what you're doing, but I'm afraid that you're going to scare people with these stories and people aren't going to want to work in our profession. And I said, Wouldn't you want people to know what they're
Mhm.
getting into?" I said, "But it's not just that, it's bigger than that.
It
We're
is.
sharing these stories that stick with us because there's more that goes into this job than what anybody talks about. We should be talking about this stuff. We should be sharing these stories." And the most amazing thing that has happened to out of this is that tons of people have written in saying that they didn't have anything to do with public safety before, but they were
Mhm.
reading these stories and they wanted it inspired them and they wanted to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And they ended up going into dispatching because of it. And it also helped them to know what it was that they were going to be getting into, and that they were happy that there were resources to be able to kind of balance out all of this stuff that was going on. But man, there were a lot of people in the beginning who were like, "No, this is not a good thing." Well, it turned out to be a good thing.
Right. And I agree. It's time to have that support.
Mhm.
We're not trying to call anybody out or take a negative turn. It's dispatchers need support for what they do.
Exactly.
They really do. They work very hard.
Mhm.
I mean, we could just see by the amount of overtime that everybody is working, but the support needs to be there.
Exactly. Fully agree. And the fact that you would tell new folks coming in right off the bat, there's going to be weight gain, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. I think that's healthy. It's good to give that information. It's just like when people would call in and they would be saying, "Where's the officer? Send them out here. Send them out here." People are getting pissed off. I always found that being real with that caller and telling them they're not just sitting around the corner, they're coming from like a township away or something like that, but also saying they're going as fast as they can to get to you.
Yeah.
Being real with them, that calmed them down more than anything else, because they knew I was being honest with them and telling them they're on their way. They're just not right around the corner waiting for you to call. There's other emergencies other than theirs. And that would always help. So then, looking over here, the inability to sleep, I think maybe on average, if I'm lucky, I get maybe 3 to 4 hours. And that was me,
Me
4.5 to 5 hours.
Me too. Yep. Sometimes on our first night back, if you don't keep that same night shift schedule when you're off, most of the time you'll go 24 hours without sleep.
Right.
On your first night back, because you don't sleep until you get off in the morning if you couldn't take a nap the day before. But no, it was hard. I couldn't do it now.
No, right. Yeah.
I'm too old for that.
I get like 5 hours of sleep now. That kind of has stuck with me a little bit, but there have been other times where I've been able to get a lot more sleep. So it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough where I'm okay. I'm still okay. But the physically exhausted, inability to sleep, this physical pain, like all of this, I remember this feeling constantly exhausted, from working hard, or that pain. And for me though, and maybe it's kind of the same for a lot of other people too, especially if you have kids, the reason a lot of times that I would wake myself up or only get 3.5 hours of sleep, 3.5, 4 hours of sleep, is because I didn't want to miss time with my kids, with my family. I felt like I was wasting the day. Even on my day off after work, that first day off, I wouldn't sleep that much because I didn't want to waste that time, because I was already missing a bunch of time with people.
Take just a quick nap so you could get up and to be able to get enough coffee or whatever just to function.
Oh, right.
Go do things, right? Yeah. Yeah, but the lack of sleep, it leads to all these other things.
Oh, yes. All kinds of cardiovascular issues. And, we were talking about, high blood pressure and all of that. But the physical pain, while I'm doing it, it's fine. But when the call is over, my back will tighten. When I read that, I almost felt like, did I write that? I didn't. But I'm just saying I could relate to it because I remember going through that. And it's because during that call, you're in that adrenaline rush. And for me, I started noticing that my shoulders would be up, while I'm typing or whichever, right? And then that my back would tighten up, but I wouldn't feel it because of the adrenaline. And then after the call was done, then my body starts to catch up to me, right? And I start to slow down and we come together, and then there's the pain. But if I just drop my shoulders a little bit, then I could breathe, and there was almost a release from that pain, but also that stress headache as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But I think one of the important factors is if we know and we can educate,
Yes,
then we have an opportunity to create better coping skills. Have that outlet, the healthy outlet of peer support or mental health resources for dispatchers.
right, exactly. Now we've got the traumatic calls, and we've got just a little bit left here before you have to jump on to the next one. So I just kind of want to read some of these because
Okay.
there's a couple parts that we want to make sure that we hit on. So, as we're looking at traumatic calls, these are the impact on the callers, tearful and children taking these calls that have to do with children, the elderly, those that are more emotional. And I know a lot of the times when I would take calls that had to do with kids, man, I think even if I didn't have kids at the time, it would still weigh on me, right? Because
Mhm.
these are innocent kids that there's nothing that can be done, especially when you're on the phone. It's not like you can reach through and hug them and say it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
And it's hard to take a lot of those.
it is. It really is. And it's like we don't have control over the type of calls that we take because it's all random.
Right.
You could be the one dispatcher that seems to get all of them, while the other person that you're sitting next to will get, what time is it, or what time does the parade start?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or also that impact on callers. I just want to touch on that really quick here because this is a good quote, because this is someone who knows what they're doing, right? And it
Hmm.
says, I get short with them, which I feel bad about because they are in crisis and need me.
Right.
Man. And we are our own worst critics, right? So that will end up eating at us, even days, months, whatever.
Yeah.
It'll pop in our heads and we're like, man, I wish I could go back.
Yeah. And our calls stay with us, some more than others, but the majority of our calls will stay with us.
Exactly. Now, looking at theme 5 here, you've got clinical symptoms,
Hmm.
and you've got these thoughts of a call, impacts on home life. And we were kind of talking about this a little bit as well. Hypervigilance, notice everyone and everything. That I
All the time.
still have that. Yes,
Me,
still have that.
me too. It's like, so when my husband is a police officer and, he likes to sit facing the door, I'm like, no, 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 get away. I have to. Because that's still that hypervigilance is there.
Right.
I'm like, I got you. You're okay.
Yeah. Or okay, fine. Let's just sit on the same side.
Right. We can
Well,
both face the door.
right, we can sit together. See, the raw emotion is just draining, and yes,
Mhm.
it is definitely draining. There's, like we were talking before, if you get a chance to step away, you can decompress, or at least try to decompress, but sometimes that emotional drain continues throughout the entire shift. And then when you finally get out of there, then I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but for me, I remember I would feel almost sick
Mhm.
because there was so much that was just going through. That was a hard thing. And then looking over here, emotionally damaged. And this says, I'm angry because this job has taken something from me that I did not give it permission to do. And that's where I'm at.
Yep.
Damn.
And that speaks a lot on, okay, preparing, teaching, equipping dispatchers
Right.
to know in what they're going to go through. Now, not everybody, but just what they're going to experience and how to cope with it if it does happen.
Man. When the helpers need help, the stigma, that is still a big thing somewhere, right? In places, right? In some places, it is huge, and in others, it's getting better. It's continuing to get better and better and better, which is why I think conversations like this, but especially studies like this that you've done, are so important. And you look at CISM, peer support,
Yep.
others, going for a visit or that they don't understand, and so they go for a visit. What can help is people coming in and seeing and observing the people, which we touched on as well. Plugging
Mhm.
in and listening to 911 calls is one of the best ways to gain a better understanding of the types of calls dispatchers experience.
Right. This was a direct recommendation from the dispatchers to
Hmm.
mental health professionals. How can mental health professionals really understand what dispatchers do? Is come into the radio room.
Yeah.
You know, Most communication centers will allow visitors to come plug in, fill out your paperwork, get your background approved, come do like sit along, and then you can really understand. what dispatchers do, because they don't understand is also related to mental health professionals.
I think it's a very good thing, and it also kind of mirrors something that my old dispatch center did, in the sense that, because when we started new, we
Hmm.
would have to do 3 ride-alongs, and what we started all doing is that the other agencies, when they had new folks coming in, and even some that wanted refreshers, they would come and sit with us. And we were doing this over and over with all the different agencies, going, cross style, because that's how we were bridging the gap.
Yep.
And it really did change the culture there in our county, because the fact that we all knew basically what everybody else does, we were able to understand each other better, work better together, and there wasn't any of this BS that was going on. Where it's like, oh, you're not doing enough, or you're not doing enough, or when
Yeah.
you send me to another channel, why am I just sitting here? But now they know, because
No,
there's other shit that's going on.
yep, that is true. So,
Uh, so let me see here. So there's implications. One of the ones we wanted to touch on here is the implications for management and agency. So I want you to talk about this, and also kind of explain what it means by implications for management and agency.
so the implications. So dispatchers experiencing compassion fatigue. Their stories, their experiences. What does this mean? It really highlights the need for management to re-examine their responses to their dispatchers. Uh, have that investment in their employees, whether it's, I know agencies are strapped. Money is very difficult, but there are things that can be done. Coping skills, training for mental health, support, asking your dispatchers after a traumatic call, how are they doing? Just little things can go a long way. Setting it up. Does this dispatcher need relief right now so they can step away to decompress? Is that even possible? Do I need to call somebody in right now? Is that an option? Does my communication center have debriefings? Does it have a quiet room? Are all these things that I can do as management if I don't have funds? Yes, they are. We can make things work. But it was just really, the study focuses on their experiences and all the stressors that dispatchers go through. So management can have an idea of firsthand account of what dispatchers experience. This isn't like statistics or numbers. This is their own voice. And next gen 911, video to 911 is another issue. So is your center prepared? I know with talking with some agencies, they do have a plan in place to where the video does not come directly in. There's a choice to whether there's like a screening option, but some do not. Some, the video comes directly into the radio room, and the dispatcher has no choice to whether to see it or not. So, is your center prepared for that type of trauma? Which is not something that is talked about, because even police, fire, and EMS rarely get to see the incident occurring in real time. They get there after the fact most of the time, not while it's happening. But now you're going to have dispatchers actually seeing it when it happens. Are you prepared for that? It is
Man.
just something for management to think about.
Along with that, which there's a lot that goes into it, right? And
Yeah.
just that fact alone, the video to 911, um, and you're right, putting it that way, those who are responding, they see it after the fact. They're not in real time, and geez, yeah, that is going to be something else. And I know there are a few people out there that, well, more than a few, that are using this already.
Mhm.
And you're right, there are options to be able to set it up where the video comes in, or even you start a video with them, or whichever, however the process ends up going for that specific call, it's blurred right away.
Right.
and which I think is good. I think that a lot of these companies that are implementing this, they're taking from the perspective of the user. They're going to different centers, their current customers, potential customers, or
Hmm.
just studies or whichever, to see or say, how do you want to see this? How do you want this to come in?
Right.
And I think it's good that those companies are looking out for dispatch in the sense as well. But like you were saying, with directors, deputy directors, even supervisors, whichever, how do you want that to come in, and how are you going to be prepared, like you were saying, for those implications, for
Hmm.
what ends up coming from that? Because now you're not just piecing it in, you're really seeing it. But on the other side of that too, is there the possibility of getting closure from these calls where at one time we're not getting anything? But is it
Right.
possible to experience closure through seeing some of this?
Definitely. That could be a component of gaining that closure for dispatchers, which could be a benefit.
It's a thin line, I think.
It is.
you
It
know
really is. It's like,
yeah,
oh, it is just
yeah, it,
dancing on either side.
right, yeah, tightrope, just kind
It
of
is.
going like, oh, you got a good thing, but there's a lot of bad. So I mean, I
Yeah,
think
I know. It's like,
oh,
oh, technology is great, but look at that over
right. Yeah. Yeah. And the idea of closure and having it in that sense, like you're right. I mean, like we were saying, it's good, but it's definitely a thin line on how it can or cannot help. And it is my hope that it'll lean more towards
there. The
the
help
good
part.
side. Yeah,
Right.
the good side of it there.
I know.
So as we're going into the wrap up of this has been awesome to have you on and talk about the findings that you have. I want to talk about really quick the future directions of all of this. Where is this going?
Where is this going? So, hopefully, this study will give insight into what dispatchers do to be able to push for development and availability of mental health supports, CISM or peer support teams, programs, having that proactive response instead of waiting until after the fact and then somebody says, hey, I want to quit because I can't do this anymore. Being proactive and having that support for the dispatchers first. Also, for mental health counselors to really understand what dispatchers do. I know a lot advertise that they work with first responders, but they're including police, fire, and EMS.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what about dispatchers? And you get crickets, you don't hear anything. So it's also to focus on mental health therapists to focus their practice or even their advertisement to include dispatchers to create outreach efforts. Also, I really want to look at the next gen 911 video as a future research project.
Mhm.
And mindfulness. Mindfulness has already been proven effective as part of a program for dispatchers. What does that look like? How can we get these things included in our center? When everybody's already overworked and understaffed, how can we implement these to help our dispatchers?
It's this is exciting. This is really good because, I kind of think about how it was when I first started out, and there wasn't stuff like this. We
Mhm.
just did what we did
Mhm.
and we continued going. And
Like cranky.
I remember thinking, when are we ever going to talk about us? Like, how come no one really thinks about the stuff that we do? Because there's a lot of shit that we go through, and it's finally happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
We can talk about it. And then you get cranky and everybody wants to know why you're cranky. And it's like, I don't know, I'm cranky.
yeah. This has been awesome to have you on again, to have you back and to go over some of these findings in detail. And I'm sure we could have talked for hours on this, but I know you've got a packed time coming ahead of you. But I want to thank you, for all of your time, that everything that you did on your way up, but especially all the work that you're doing now and with this study. And for those watching and listening, take note, because there's a lot of good stuff in here. And for anyone who's looking for more information, not only on you, but where to find more information on this study, where can they go?
So it is in the process of being published, but publishing is not a quick process, I am finding out. So it takes a little while. So that's why I'm doing like the podcast or the conferences, is to get that out there before it's actually in print.
Yeah.
So, but email ajohn209@odu.edu.
Awesome.
I'll gladly share what I can until it actually comes out in black and white print and everybody can get a copy of it, because it's going to be open access too. So
Perfect.
so
Awesome.
Knock on wood. So I'll gladly share.
Knock for you too. Awesome. So that is excellent. I'll make sure to put your information in the blog post when this episode goes out as well. And as always, it's an honor to have you on, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I always enjoy coming back here. So I knew I had to when I talked about it in the very beginning. I was like, I've had participants say, "Oh, I listened to his show." So I had to come back and share.
Awesome. Yes. Very, very cool. I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. For everything else that you want to find, you can go to my bio page, and that's going to be links.co/WTT podcast. That's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services. Big shout out to subscribers of the podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as Twitter, and you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.